Almost 200 learners were not able to complete their computer application technology exam as a result of yesterday's power cut. The stage 2 load shedding that took place on Wednesday coincided with the exam that relied solely on the use of technology. Basic Education Department expressed its concern over the possible interruptions as matriculants sat for their information technology today. Our reporter Nosipho Mncube spoke to the Gauteng Education spokesperson Steve Mabona.
I'm still at the Curtis Nkondo School of Specialization, where some of the learners here were one of those affected by the power outage that took place yesterday. But to speak to me more about the severity of this power cut, I have with me Gauteng Education spokesperson Steve Mabona. Steve, thank you so much for speaking to us. Can you just firstly indicate to us the severity of yesterday's power outage with regards to the matric final exams?
Thank you very much. Look, the impact was huge. And we are affected severely. It's something that you really don't wish that must happen to our learners. Some learners had to be quarantined for about 2 hours, and fortunately, the electricity was restored. Some had to, in some centers they wanted to start very late, but we advised them not to do that because you can't have learners for 3 hours and then you want them to write, because probably psychologically they would have been affected by this, so you can't take that chance. And in some instances we were fortunate that schools had to bring generators, and they could still within a certain period manage to start or commence rather their examination. But in some other schools we then had to advise that they need to release, because there was no hope that they will have electricity. So we're talking over 200 learners that could not sit for their final examination. It's quite challenging for us, because the sad part is this one, that some learners had actually written already, but their work could not be saved in the system because the electricity just went. So it's quite unfortunate, but we are hopeful that the Department of Basic Education will then give them a concession and probably announce at a later stage on when they will be given an opportunity to write. And they will actually write a different paper, because it will be an unfair advantage for them to write the very same paper. So we are hopeful that they will go back, revisit what they did, when the date is announced, so that we can then inform them. But we are hopeful that at least today, as we have commenced with the process here at Curtis Nkondo, and up to so far electricity is still live. So we are hopeful that we're not going to be disrupted, and because here late afternoon, the afternoon session could not sit, though the morning session was at some point disrupted, but the electricity was restored and they could manage to finish with their work. We were so fortunate, and we are hopeful that today we are not going to be affected by this, because actually we have only one session. So if we are done with this one, the morning session, we should be fine.
This is a school that relies heavily on the use of electricity. As you had mentioned yesterday, that they're one of the schools where learners haven't had chalkboards since primary school. They make use of smart boards and gadgets for their learning. Are there any plans or hopes to try and ensure that they have some backup installed in these schools to ensure that no learning is disrupted, whether it's final exams or any sort of exams or learning through the course of the year, that none of that is disrupted throughout the year?
No, definitely. Those are the plans that are afoot. You can't have schools that are going to be affected by electricity, but you'll also understand that in the event of this, during teaching and learning, our teachers have laptops and learners have their tablets. So in terms of teaching and learning, they can still utilize their laptops to access the lessons, and learners will be in a position to can go into their tablets and access them. But it's quite frustrating, because it's very easy for a teacher to use the smart board, because learners can then follow easily, unlike him focusing on the laptop, which will probably might take time. But it's very easy to teach utilizing the smart board. But indeed, we need to make sure that we accommodate any eventuality, so that we are not affected by this. If you are about to write something that needs power, and you are severely affected by load shedding, then you really need to make sure that we have. Today we have encouraged some of the schools to have generators on board so that we are not disrupted. But the good thing about today is that we have about 1,200 learners that are writing. Unlike yesterday, we had quite a huge number. I mean, that was over 10,000 learners that were expected to write. So we are hopeful that today we are not going to be disrupted.
Thank you very much. That's Steve Mabona from the Gauteng Education, just speaking to us about yesterday's power outage as well as plans today to try and ensure that some schools do have backup generators. He also tells us that there are about 1,200 learners writing today as compared to yesterday where we had a larger number of about 10,000 learners writing, but fortunately only 200 affected. We also understand that the Department of Basic Education will make plans to try and ensure that these learners do write their exam eventually through the course of the exam period. But that's it from here. Back to you in studio.